Good evening. Tonight we're starting off in Genesis chapter 5. Remember at the end of our last session, it was said that people started to call on the name of the Lord. And so that's kind of our prayer tonight. We're going to call on the name of the Lord as we study this passage together. So Genesis chapter 5. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created. So when it talks about man, this scripture is really talking about, it's referring to all of humanity. Male and female were created in the image of God. When Adam had lived 130 years, he became the father of a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. Remember that in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain became jealous of Abel's offering, which was accepted by God, and Cain's was rejected. And so Cain killed his own brother and then was banished and went off. And Adam and Eve conceived again. They had another son, and this son was named as Seth. And so this is the lineage of Adam through Seth. And apparently Adam was 130 years old when this happened in this story. Again, this isn't so much about a historical event, but really what is the message that we're to pull out of this story? What's the moral? And so then it continues on in the lineage of Adam. The days of Adam after he became the father of Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. After 930 years, you have a right to go be with God. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. Seth lived after the birth of Enosh 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan. Enosh lived after the birth of Kenan 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalalel. Kenan lived after the birth of Mahalalel 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. Mahalalel lived after the birth of Jared 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. Jared lived after the birth of Enoch 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after the birth of Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Now, I want to pause right there. We're not really sure what that means. Most probably think it's kind of what happened to Elijah, that he didn't experience death the way that we understand it, that God took him up into heaven in a kind of in a special way because he was such a godly man. And so that's probably the best interpretation of this strange passage in the midst of a strange chapter. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. Methuselah lived after the birth of Lamech 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he became the father of a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, "Out of the ground which the Lord had cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the toil of our hands." Lamech lived after the birth of Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I think that's the record. Noah, at 500 years old, had 3 sons. I think rather than get caught up in, is this historical? The most important thing we can do is look at what's the meaning of it. And one of the things that you can see in this book of Genesis is when God's people sin, how does God reorient them back in a connection with him? And one of the things that you can see pretty much through all this lineage is a decrease amount of years that they live. And we'll see that God sets the number of years of a man's life in our next session. So kind of as a side note, you don't live as long if you sin. And so I don't know what that says about us. You know, they were living 900 years back then, and maybe our average lifespan is 80 some. I think the real lesson here is that for a full and rich life, walk with God and do the things that you know God would have you to do. We'll start tomorrow in Genesis chapter 6. See you then.